Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
This is how I got into franchising. I had this business, AmSpirit Business Connections. I knew I wanted to be more than just something that was in Central Ohio in what I call the greater Columbus region. I knew I wanted more, and there was a guy, Barney Greenbaum, who was with FranNet, who came to me and said, "You ought to franchise this." And I did. I bought a house from a big name attorney. I bought my house from this attorney and struck up a friendship with him, and they had franchise attorneys there and got all the paperwork ready. And I went back to Barney and said, "Hey, Barney, I'm ready to sell franchises here with FranNet. Can you help me?" And Barney was very gracious, but he's like, "Listen, you know what? We don't help newbies like this. And, when you get to 10 franchises, then we can kind of talk." It's like, well, how do you sell something when you've never sold something? And it's hard.
Yeah.
But I met a guy, you just heard him, Regan Rodriguez, who was part of the AmSpirit organization, and he was a franchise consultant, and very, not with FranNet, not with one of the big players, very eager to take me under his wing and help me learn. Help me realize that, hey, there's more than just FranNet out there in FranChoice. There's all these franchise consultants, and what about this, and what about this? And Regan was doing I believe it was a weekly or it was a monthly program that you did where you brought franchisees in. And
I was doing the monthly seminars. I do a little bit of a workshop at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, yes, you're correct. I'd have the CEO of the main franchise, so the franchisor come in.
Yeah, it was great. Anyhow, I got a guest on the program today, if you haven't guessed. Regan Rodriguez. He's not in the franchise world anymore. He literally graduated from it. But he is what we'll term a futurist who teaches very wealthy people, stratospherically wealthy legacy families. These are people who have ones and lots of zeros after it, and they're not counting decimal points here. And he helps these families that have these just huge amounts of money that really it's generational wealth. He helps those families become impact investors, to make investments into projects that are sustainable projects, social good sorts of projects.
Yes.
Because when you're having those sorts of money, when you have that kind of money, you, to a degree, you have enough, but you want to have impact. So anyhow, Regan, thank you.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And you're right, Frank. So what I do is I'm fortunate in the fact that I help manage a foundation. It's a private foundation, and it's made up of 26 what we refer to as kind of uber stratosphere wealthy trustees, legacy families. So you are correct. They own family offices, which means that they have a net worth or liquid capital of 100 million or more. So they are not about wealth creation, but rather wealth preservation. Getting to, though, how we met was, and I think it was when you were franchising it, was it around 2006, Frank?
It was towards the end of 2006 that I started franchising. And the reason I remember it is this, is I had to get an audit for 3 months. I didn't even have any business, because I'd created a franchise entity. Well, you need to get audited. It's like, and then you need to get audited again in January. It was like, oh, why didn't somebody tell me this? Because I would have just delayed everything 3 months and only been audited once. So it was like a $3,000 mistake.
Got it. No, I also remembered 2006, and sorry if I interrupted. Were you going to say something else on that? No, I remember that because of Michael Dirks is who told me about it. He and I used to attend a Bible study that someone else that you and I both know, Brent Long,
Yep, great guy.
Lead.
Yeah.
Oh, phenomenal guy. And so Michael Dirks asked me one day, I think after the after the bet. I would always mention kind of controversial things.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, it would almost feel like kind of awkward. But Michael Dirk said, let me talk with Regan here. And so he said to me, do you know what AmSpirit is? And I said, no. And then he invited me to a chapter, and then I joined. And then a few months or maybe a couple of weeks after that, you reached out to me, Frank, because I guess your intuition was like, franchise consultant. And I just franchised my business and I need some help.
Yeah,
So,
I was lost. I really was. And I mean, you connected with me to people, and eventually connected me to Jeff Hauk, who was my first franchisee.
yeah,
And
yeah, out of Cleveland. Yeah.
yeah, he
Mhm.
was a broker and he was helping me, and it didn't work out. And Jeff looked at me and said, geez, I don't know why this guy wouldn't do this. I would love to do it. I'm like, Jeff, why don't you do it? He didn't realize, hey, you can buy franchises. You're a broker. A lot of people do that. Uh, and
He bought his own, he was drinking his own Kool-Aid.
Yeah. But you start pulling back, you start connecting the dots. That was, you connecting me. It may have been directly to Jeff or to somebody, and just a lot of great connections. I mean, we're friends. We've stayed in contact. It's, almost 20 years now. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so and I certainly appreciate that. But I wanted to get you on. There's
Mhm.
I want to, you know, I want you to kind of share your journey and how you got to this place where, I mean, you're selling, you're brokering franchises that can range anywhere from, AmSpirit's, 10,000. Well, they can go way up, but the average is probably 30, $40,000, which is a lot of money. But so much more money is 30, $40 million or 300, $400 million. And how do you kind of get to that point?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've always and still continue to work directly with people uh, versus businesses. Isn't it interesting? When I
Yeah.
did franchise consulting, I worked with people that were tired of corporate America or had been laid off, fired, and they thought, I don't want to do this again. So I would walk with them together on what kind of business do you want to start? What is it that you're looking for? So then from there, I then got into uh, merger and acquisitions, and I was not successful at that. I really wasn't. And I think it was just because you're not dealing with people, right? You're
Yeah.
dealing with businesses and then seeing, and that's just not me. It
Yeah.
took me, I think I realized that some people like the B2B. I'm fine with working with that individual, that person.
Yeah.
So then
I mean,
from there,
I can
go
totally
ahead.
see the difference there, because you're probably dealing with a corporate board, and you're not creating that relationship. You create a relationship with somebody who's buying the franchisors, you've got the relationship, the prospective franchisee, you've got the relationship, and you can manage those two personalities, if you will. But when you're dealing with a company, you're dealing with a board, and you're dealing with the board. You might be dealing with officers that don't want it to go through, right? And other people who, yeah, they would be a mess. So anyhow,
It
sorry.
would. Yeah, so it started with this foundation, and I had uh, it really started with just building that relationship with them. And the person that was the managing member lived in Palm Beach, so I would make the drive and I'd go and see him in Palm Beach, and I'd have a cup of coffee with him, and my goal was to do 10% of the talking and let him do 90. So what I would do is I would listen, I'd take notes, but what I went my taking notes is, let's assume I wanted to interject something or mention my thoughts. I didn't. I would write down the note. Then at the very end, I would say that there was a few things that you brought up that I didn't want to interrupt. Can I ask a little further on this? And they'd say yes. And so that's how it would start. From there, I would then uh, I would have their address. I know I've shared this with you before, Frank. I have a copy. You're seeing this right here, the $2 bills. You can actually get these at the bank. Go to your branch and just say, I'd like to order 50 of these. And you give them $100 and they order them, they give you a call and you can pick up an envelope of this. You don't know. This is just a little thing I've come up with. Not that this is the secret. So if you want to network with the big billionaires, people that are on Forbes list, I know that was kind of the title of the talk. How do you network with that billionaire? Just something as little as this. When I say as little as this, I mailed a little old lady that has a net worth of 500 million. I mailed her a card after we got together with a $2 bill like this. She gets back to me and says, "Thank you. I gave it to my grandson, but now my granddaughter is fighting about it because I thought I'm giving it to both of them. I don't know what to do. And then I've got other grandkids."
Yeah.
So you know what I did?
You went and got
I
more.
mailed her a card with 5 of these
Yeah.
so she could give them to her other grandkids. I don't know why people think these are cool. They're $2 bills.
Well, it's impactful, right? It's a differentiator. It's like getting a handwritten note, right?
What I do, I handwrite it and then I put this $2 bill in the card.
Yeah. And I don't want to, well, I don't want to pick on other organizations. Not, I mean, just, some people, there are services out there that will send cards for you. I'll leave names out of it. And
Yeah.
I'm just, why don't you use one of those services? I like to handwrite something. I just,
Frank, you're asking me what is the key? That is the whole point of today. How do you
yeah,
network with that big whale? With
right.
that big, this is just what I did. It was just my own little kind of personality
Yeah.
into it. And you mail them a card with a $2 bill.
Yeah.
It's just something different.
And it's literally $2. For you, it
Yeah.
costs $2, but the impact on them is, I don't want to say priceless. Um, but if you sent them a $10 Starbucks card, right? I think you're worse off. That's just me personally, even though the value is 5 times as much, that $2 bill, because if they want to get a $2 bill to give to their grandkids, they're going to have to go to the bank and they're going to have to order them and then go back to the bank and pick them up. Right. And you've basically done that for them and they don't really know all that, but still it's just like, okay, this is something unique, you know? So,
I have
um,
a friend that raises capital for big causes, right? One of them I think was called Walk Through the Bible. It's like a museum that they're doing in
okay. Yeah.
DC. And so he contacted, when he was still alive, the family office of Rich DeVos, which,
Oh yeah.
okay, he mails him what I told him to do, a $2 bill. A few weeks later, the assistant, the DeVos, mails him card for box seats for the Orlando Magic
Oh
because
my
he
God.
owns the Orlando Magic.
Yeah.
So of course he had to send me that picture, and he's like, "Look, Regan, great advice. I sent $2 bill, and they got me box seats to the Orlando Magic."
That's funny. That's great.
And not only did he send me a text on it, he placed this on LinkedIn and it showed or it said, "Thank you for the $2 bill here in return." And it was signed by Rich DeVos and saying,
Yeah.
"Join me for box seats. Watch the Orlando Magic."
That's a great story. Well, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, um, one of the questions I had for you is
Uh-huh.
just talking about the notable differences between networking with that guy or gal, that person looking to buy a 70K franchise versus the person looking to invest 700 million into a hotel project, which you and I've talked about is sustainable because it's creating jobs somewhere, um, making use of property, probably putting a sewer system in, bringing water to where there's not water,
Yes.
or maybe it's a solar project. Lots of different types of things you work on. But
Uh,
what are the differences between those? They're both people. They both have 206 bones. The same basic DNA. Is there a difference between how you're networking with these people?
well, a, a couple of things. Let's talk about the people that have the ideas, right? That
Hmm.
person that maybe wants to get funding on an assisted living facility, or that person that wants to get funded on that solar project. They are very similar to that candidate that wants to buy a franchise. They
Hmm.
really are. Now, if we're talking about the family offices I work with, the people that are 100 mil or above, that's different. But I think your question is whether someone wants to buy a franchise or somebody wants my help in building up a fund that, let's just say it's a wind farm. For the average wind farm is 105 million, right? Because
Hmm.
just one wind turbine is 1.3 million.
Okay.
So it's going to be about 100 million. Those people, yes, they're very similar. And I know you're asking how. They have kind of flawed assumptions sometimes.
Who's they?
Flawed thoughts.
But who when you
Okay.
say they, who do you mean when you say they?
The same people that want to buy a franchise
Hmm.
and the same people that have a project they want funding, an
Gotcha.
idea. So I'll give you an example. When I was living in Columbus, Ohio, I knew a guy that was the managing partner of a really big accounting firm.
Yep.
Okay, well, one of the big ones. I won't mention the name. And he came. Somebody had given him my name, so he called me and he said, "Regan, I'm sick and tired of being a CPA. I've been doing this for years. I want to buy a franchise, but I know the perfect one." He said, "You need to understand, I'm analytical, right? I'm a CPA." He says, "I am left brain all the way. Every decision I make is conscious and based on logic." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "That's why I want to buy a restaurant."
That
And I
makes no
said,
sense.
"That's what I wanted to say." And by the way, this was in 2008.
Yep.
And I said, "Do you think it's logical to buy something?" And he goes, "Extremely logical. Really? Right now in this day and age?" And he goes, "Regan, people have to eat, right? If they don't eat, they die. So that's what I want to buy." That's what I mean by flawed assumptions,
Yeah.
right? They're not, they're almost being uh, too analytical. And I get that as well from people that want, well, I'll give an example since you gave a hotel. This isn't somebody I would work with, but it's an example. Somebody walks into a hotel that's very busy and they say, "Gosh, this is in a great area. I bet the occupancy rate is just, phenomenal on this." But he doesn't have a pot to piss in. And he's thinking this will be easy to get financing. I mean, after all, it's cash flow positive. What do you have to know about a hotel, or what do you need to know about a multi-unit? That person will argue with me, just like the other person that said, "No, food makes sense because people have to eat."
Yeah.
They will say the same thing. Why wouldn't a bank, or why wouldn't someone, another example, you gave me a referral once of a woman that said, "I've got this brilliant idea." She didn't say brilliant, but that's my
Yeah.
sarcasm here. And she says, "I'm going to buy all the properties that are, and then whoever gives me the money to buy all of these homes, we're going to rent them out. And then I will pay that per," it says, "I'm going to be so generous, we'll split it 50-50." And I responded, if you remember, to the email, and I said, "By the way, that's flawed thinking." This person, don't they realize that if someone's worth millions to give you to buy these, they could hire a management company and,
Yeah.
"Oh, you think you're so generous, you're giving them 50, they'll be able to keep 90%. So why are they going to do that?" That's what I meant by flawed thinking,
Yeah. No,
Frank.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I know who you're talking about. I remember the referral, and I think I don't. Well, The person's doing what they set out to do. I don't know if it went the same. I don't know if they got funded, or it may have been somebody coming in and saying, listen, I'm not going to do it the way you want to do it. Because their way of thinking is, hey, I could live in tropical paradise and make a fortune all at the same time.
Oh, and I get people like that with hotels.
Yeah,
They say, hey, I'll live on the top floor of this beachfront hotel in Miami, and that
yeah,
way I can live on the top floor. And it's just, if it was that, well, you know what I say whenever I get people like that, that they'll say, I know this hotel, it's very cash flow positive. I want to live on the top floor. And I say, if it was that easy, don't you think I'd be doing that?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
don't you think I'd love to live on the top floor of a hotel on beachfront? I mean, I would do it myself. Why would I be talking to you?
Well, and that's at every level. I mean, realtors will tell stories all the time that people will come to them and say, hey, listen, if you find a duplex that I can buy, rent out one side and live in the other side for free, let me know. And the realtor says, well, if I find that opportunity, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to rent out both sides and stay where I'm living. Why would I give that? That's too sweet, too much of a sweetheart deal. So, what are challenges you run into with building healthy relationships with these ultra wealthy type?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm, I dealt with a situation like that about a month ago. I remember, so let me, sometimes the clients that I work with, they want to get funded sooner versus later. Sometimes they might even have certain bills that they're behind on. And when they get funded on that project, they're going to use part of that for their bills, right? And that, uh, I'm not going to allow them to guilt trip me into contacting my investor on something like that.
Mm,
So, for example, I had somebody that was wanting 150 million. Obviously, wouldn't it make sense that before someone approves someone on $150 million, that they're going to do some kind of due diligence,
I would
right?
think, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I said, look, you've got to understand it is a 90-day due diligence. It's like, is there any way to shorten that? Is there any way that I could get them? You're asking for 150 million. Once again, my investors are going to take 90 days. If you're not okay with that, then we're not moving forward. Well, the guy says, okay with that. At day 45, he says, hey, I've got Visa that's calling me.
Uh,
Next, he's like, I got MasterCard that's calling me. I got Discover that's calling me. I got American Express that's calling me. Maybe you can call your investor, right? Thinking that can manipulate him to, and I said, I'm not going to do that. So calls another few weeks later. You don't know how bad my situation is. And what he wanted to know is, have you called him and did you tell him the financial situation? So I wasn't going to lie. I said, no. He really wanted me to say yes. Why? Why didn't you? I said, if I do that, there's no need for a 90-day due diligence. It'll end right away, and he'll know you're not the type of person. He says, is there any way you could get me his phone number? No, that'll also decline the deal, because you will call and tell him about your financial situation. Now, here's another situation. Here's another reason why I don't allow my clients to have access to my investors. I know somebody else that's got something that's really great. In other words, a innovative kind of invention with wind turbines that can actually store the energy, and it's so much better. I don't want to give away too much info, but this person is also dealing with kind of, well, he's just very desperate, right? He's already paid a lot of money for patents, all of this kind of thing. And he said, would you give me access to your investor? And I said, look, I want this deal to go through. And you know me, Frank, I love alternative energy projects. I even
right,
have
yeah.
an MBA specifically in sustainable energy. So I'm like, we're not going to do that because I want this to go through. And you think I can tell that you're desperate. I can tell. If I can tell, don't you think somebody that's worth $2 billion has even a better intuition than I do? He's going to smell it. And I go, let me tell you about this guy. He is shrewd. If he can smell that you're desperate, he's going to take the majority equity. So let me handle it. And let me tell another story that I dealt with, that the broker that had sent me this deal had been calling almost every day or emailing every day. The client he had referred me to is like swearing in emails, F this and that, and we need to do this faster, all of this stuff. When we get on conference calls, I'm not nervous, I'm calm, and I'm explaining to them, look, we haven't gotten a decline. They're just not completed with the due diligence. Your attitude should be that no news is still good news. So no matter how upset he'd be, I'm going to maintain being well polished.
Right.
Well, a few days later, I see an email where they were talking about me, but they forgot to delete it. So as I was scrolling below, the broker said to the client he referred me to, his client, mine, whatever, he said, you notice how well polished Regan is when we get him on the phone, no matter how upset we get. If he's this well polished with us, could you imagine how good he is with these billionaire investors? And when I read that, it made me smile. And I thought, if you only knew. And I literally said out loud, and this is why I don't give them access to you.
Yeah.
Right. And I
Yep.
just dealt with somebody just last week. The guy I said, funding is not going to happen on Monday because it's Labor Day and banks are closed. So that's not going to happen. Well, is it going to happen the next day? I said, here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to call them on September 3rd and ask, right? He said he was going to do it the first week in September. We're going to trust that he does it the first week. And guess what? If it's Friday and he hasn't, we're going to be patient. We're going to wait until next week. So you asked, what have I learned? Some of my investors, I've got one, he's got a great way to do due diligence. I probably shouldn't give this one away. You think he doesn't want to take the time to doing due diligence, but what he does say is, give me 120 days. Go to 120 days. You got a problem with that? Because we can decline it right now, pal. Okay, I'll give you 120 days. And then on the contract, he puts parentheses. He says, this is an estimate. So you know how he does due diligence? He lets it wait to 121 and see if that guy goes crazy and gets nervous and starts sending an email and starts doing manipulative stuff. And he's like, you know what? I didn't even have to spend money on due diligence. You just gave yourself away, pal. Go after yourself. You know? Is there, or say, go tell him that. I had one guy goes, you know what you ought to tell him? Tell him to go take a long walk off a short pier. I don't want to fund you. And you know what this person told me? You know what the difference is between a millionaire and a billionaire? I go, please tell me. I'd love to get to that. And he goes, it's called patience. The reason why millionaires don't reach that is they get impatient because they're so damn ambitious. And he says, I don't do business with people that are overly ambitious. I want that person that is able to be disciplined, that is able to, and you know my personality, I get a little emotional too. Yet we can channel that. Yet we can be conscious,
right,
in what we say and do.
All right. We're kind of running short on time here. If you could touch on your project, Worthy Domes.
Which is now Worthy Futures. Okay. Worthy Domes was kind of a hobby business of mine that I have this kind of creative bug in me where I this is why I like alternative energy projects. I love the concept of waste to energy, getting trash and converting that into energy. Actually, I'm working on a project right now in South Africa that is 500 million and it's waste to energy. Really excited about it. Just kind of added that one in a couple of weeks ago. So talking about, I knew about a substance known as polyurea, or if you're familiar with like the inside of your fridge.
Right.
That material is is the same material that's inside a cooler.
Mm.
So it insulates real well. Polyurea and polyurethane, you put them together.
Okay.
So I thought of an idea of, I knew that there's a lot of plastic in the ocean. What if we grab all of that plastic, recycle it, and turn it into a home? And then I thought, but what we don't want is if another hurricane hits, this had happened in 2010, by the way, when there was that catastrophic hurricane and earthquake that happened in Haiti, and then another one that that hit in Puerto Rico. So I found a plastic recycling manufacturing plant. And I said to this guy, look, I've got this idea. Can we make these into these panels that will make them like a dome shape? The reason why we do that is because of the aerodynamics. That way, if another hurricane happens, it'll just blow right past it. Well, we have over 300 of those domes in a medical clinic in Haiti. There's been 3-4 hurricanes ever since then. They're still standing till this day. So then the beginning of this year, based on what I learned at through my MBA program at the University of Oxford, I learned one big thing, and that's that you can make money on carbon credits. So we also plant trees, and we make money on planting trees. So I think that's it. Enough said on that.
How can people get a hold of you? Any parting shots, final words?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way. Just type in Regan Rodriguez, futurist. You'll find me. And again, the whole point of this is relationships.
Yep.
Can I close with this, Frank?
Yep.
I mentioned you and I got together 20 plus years ago, when you were franchising this. And I remember you brought your wife along. And I remember we had lunch at Max and Irma's there in downtown, which is not even around. I think that mall's not even around. And I remember at the end, you were asking me a little bit about me, what I like. And based on that, your intuition, I don't know if you remember this, but right while we were walking out, you said, do you know who John Maxwell is? And John Maxwell was like new back then. And I go, oh, yeah, I just finished reading one of his new books, which is this one, The 21 Indispensable Qualities of a Leader.
Yep.
And again, the point of today was, how do you network with that family office, with that person that's worth 100 million or more? And the answer is relationships.
Yep.
You said, how do I maintain those relationships with those people? Again, I don't let my clients have access to them. I remain very conscious when I'm talking with them. So speaking of 21 indispensable qualities of a leader, you can see that this book is like broken up here. It's so old. You can see all kinds of pages here that'll break out here. And one of the chapters is on relationships. And let me look for it here. I had it, and then I just got rid of it here. It talked about a story about, let me see if I can find a story about a young kid named Paco. Now, if you know, in Spain, that name Paco is a very common name. It would be like saying Frank is what the name is. And found it.
All right.
The story is about a father and a teenage son named Paco, whose relationship breaks down. After the son runs away from home, the father begins a long journey in search of him. Finally, as a last resort, the man puts an ad in the local newspaper in Madrid. It reads, "Dear Paco, meet me in front of the newspaper office tomorrow at noon. All is forgiven. I love you." The next morning, in front of the newspaper office were 800 men named Paco, desiring to restore a broken relationship. Never underestimate the power of relationships on people's lives.
I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.